Alright, hey everyone. So in this video I'm going to go over what a smart object is. Some of you have heard this before or know a little bit about what they are. And we'll talk a little bit about the history log as well. I'll get into that as we start doing some things here. But first let's go into smart objects first. So I have an image here. This is one of my paintings that I've brought into Photoshop. And if we Command plus and zoom in here a bit, we can see looks pretty good. I mean, once I get really far in, it starts to get a bit pixelated, but we can see it's nice and crisp, very clean, no distortion or degradation or anything like that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to unlock this layer, and now I can start doing things to it, right? And let's say I'm going to free transform, so I'm going to Command or Control T. And let's say I'm working in a larger document and I have lots of moving parts, lots of things. And let's just say I bring something in and then I want to shrink it down. And remember, you have to hit this check mark here, or you can press return as well or enter. So I've moved this, I've shrunk this thing down and I've moved it around. And let's say later on in my working document, I decide, oh shoot, I want to enlarge that again, or I want to get that bigger. So let's go ahead and free transform again. And let's bring it back to the original size. Okay, and then we hit check mark, yes. Now look at all that degradation that's happened, right? So think of this as destructive versus non-destructive, right? A regular object that's not a smart object, if you resize it down like this and then bring it back later, you're going to get this degradation in the pixel quality. So first thing is a smart object. Photoshop will remember that original size and quality of all of your smart objects so that when you resize them later, they will have the same quality. And I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to Command Z, undo. Okay, so I'm back to my original quality here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to right click on this layer and convert to smart object. That's what we're going to do there. So you'll know the smart object because they'll have this little page with the top right corner peeled down, but it looks like this in the bottom right hand corner of your layer thumbnail. So now I'm going to Command T to free transform again, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna shrink it down and accept that. And then now let's bring it back. Okay. And we can see, still looks nice and clean and crisp, just like the original did. So that's the first thing a smart object can do. A smart object will preserve the image quality. So I'm going to go into the history here, and we can see basically everything that I'm doing is being tracked. So let's say I move this here, and I'll do another free transform. Let's say I move. So everything I'm doing is being recorded by Photoshop. And at any point in this history log, let me accept that, I can go back to a previous version of where I was at some particular point in the document. And there's some interesting things you can do here. Let's just say throughout the document you had a particular place that you really liked. You can do what's called a snapshot there. That'll save it, and that will automatically happen anytime you save. You could create a new document. So let's just say I go back to, let me hit accept there. Let's say I go back to this stage. I could hit this button here that is create a new document from the current state, and basically that will create another document. So then I could work on that, and I could split these into two. But the history log is nice because it does record everything you're doing, and you can change how long this history log is. If you come up into Photoshop and go to your preferences, if you come down to performance here, And then here, history states 20. So my computer, I have it set to record 20 changes, right? You could set this, I believe, up to 1,000, but just know the higher this is, the more memory it's going to eat up, and Photoshop might slow down for you if you have that on a higher number. I think the standard is 50, but I like to keep mine a little bit lower. So this is the history, and you'll get used to working with this. I usually don't have it open when I'm working, but some folks like to have it open so they can kind of track everything they're doing. And if Command Z, right? Command Z is usually good for me just to go back a step or two. But let's just say you make a mistake somewhere early on, but then you kept working for an hour or so. And let's just say you did 30 or 40 changes, but you want to get back to where you were at a particular point. You can come to history and do that, and then the next time you make an action, this will clear here. So I'm going to come back to this first step here where we were on background, and I'm going to unlock this layer and see it started over again for us. Okay? So that's history. Now let's go back to smart objects here. Let's go back to what else they can do. So right now, my object is not a smart object, and I'm gonna show you something here. So if we go into filters, and let's just say, oh, I don't know, let's go into crystallize. Let's just do some cool effect here. So we can set how much of an effect we want. Let's just hit OK, and we see. So we've applied a filter. We can see my layer right here, and the filter has just applied to it. So think of this as destructive filtering, right? I can't do anything to this now once I've done that. I could always Command Z and get rid of it, but once I make that change to a layer that's a non-smart object, it's essentially permanent, right? I can't do anything about that. But if we come into layer, and let's convert to smart object again, and now let's go to filter, and let's do, I don't know, just something else. Let's blur. Let's do motion blur, right? So that's a pretty extreme blur, but let's just say, I don't know, something like that. I want to blur. I want to give my image a blur. I hit OK. And then now we see, instead of it happening directly to the layer, it did what we've been learning about adjustment layers, but essentially it put a little smart filter on that I can turn on and off, and I can see that at any stage. And here we are, just like with the text effects, we have a little effects there. If we do any type of effects to our layer, here we have a little filter icon that lets us know that this does in fact have a smart filter on there. So that's the other thing that smart layers can do, is you can put essentially non-destructive filters on that you can turn on or off. And if I want to get rid of this, I can right click and I can hit clear smart filters, and that gets rid of that. Okay, so that's the second thing smart layers can do. And the last one is a pretty handy thing to do if you have a lot of copies going, but let me just show you this here in practice. I'm going to change my canvas size here. I want to make this a bit wider. Let's say 45 inches here. I'm dealing with okay. So I'm going to, let's move this over. So take note, my painting is a smart object, and I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to make some copies here. So I'm going to make one copy and make a second copy here. Okay. And let's say I'm working, and with whatever the object is, let's just say you have a particular icon throughout a document, and it's a smart object, and you make 10, 20 different copies of it. And let's say you have to decide to make a change, right? You want to make a change to a color or something, and then rather than selecting all 20 of those and making those changes manually, I mean, there's other ways to do it here, but if you're dealing with the smart object, all you have to do is just make a change to the original, and it will apply to everything else in the document. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So let's just say I have this painting, and let's say I decide I want to make this yellow a light blue or something. So I could make that change manually and go through each one, or I can go to the original. Here's layer 0, so we see copy and then copy 2. I can come to layer 0, and I can double click this thumbnail, and that will open up the original smart object layer for me. And then I can I'll make my changes now. So I could come to, oh, I'll go to my magic wand tool and let me just select. Remember, I'm holding shift to add to this selection. Oh, I lost it. Okay. So let me just select, I don't know, as much as this yellow as I can. So my tolerance is pretty low here, but I'm dealing with hard edges, so I don't really have to worry. I mean, if I had some yellow next to some orange, I might want to set that tolerance a bit higher, but for what I'm doing, that, you know, yellow to red to black, I can keep a low tolerance there. So let's say, yeah, this upper right-hand corner, I want to make this blue. So then I'll come to my paint bucket tool, or G, and let's foreground picker. Let's say I'll pick a light sky blue right here. And I'll fill that there. Okay. And then Command D to get rid of that. Okay, that looks okay. And then if I just come to File and save this, and then if I close it and go back to my original document that had the three, we see all three of those changes have been made because I changed the master copy of that smart layer. So the smart layer preserves the image quality when you're playing with the size, the physical size, so you can shrink it and bring it back and not lose any image quality. You can apply non-destructive filters where you can turn those on and off. And the last thing is you can affect changes through every copy of a smart object by altering the main one there. And then again, so if we look at the history, we can see I've done all these things here. And if I want to go back to, let's say, right when I converted it to a smart object, back when I was doing that motion blur, I can click there, and that takes me back to where I was previously.